Welcome to Greek for a Week. We are looking at another couple of verses here in the book of First Peter, and we are continuing our study here in chapter 3, verses 1 through 7. And this week I am looking specifically at verses 5 and 6. So you'll notice here, and we'll talk about this here in just a minute, you'll notice the word for, or the word gar. You'll notice that I'll make a connection with that conjunction that is used in verse 5, and we'll see how it relates to verses 1 through 4. But first, let's go ahead and translate verses 5 and 6, and then we will look at just a few things that I think will help us understand verses 5 and 6. So Peter begins by saying, "For in this way, in former times, holy women also, who hoped in God, adorned themselves by submitting to their own husbands, just as Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, whose children you have become, if you do good and you do not fear any terror." All right, so as we look at these couple of verses, let's keep in mind that verses 1 through 4, if you will, provided exhortations specifically for the wives. And these expectations were basically, Peter is answering the question, how do I, as the wife, live in the home? So those exhortations were provided in verses 1 through 4. So the word gar here makes the connection to provide us the motivational grounds for those exhortations in verses 1 through 4. So that's the function of gar. Remember, conjunctions have a function, and they typically answer the question how. That is, how are verses or how are phrases related together? You have here a participle, a present active participle, feminine, nominative, plural of elpizo. So this is hi elpizusai. It's an attributive participle, which means that they're simply attributing a quality to the holy women. And it's these holy women that did what they hoped, and they hoped specifically in God. The ekos moon, here is third person plural, imperfect active indicative of kosmeo. It means adorned. And then lastly here we have a hupatasa menai. Okay, this is a participle, and you'll notice when I translated it, I used the word by. I said that the holy women who hoped in God adorn themselves by submitting. So I'm suggesting here that this is a participle of means. The means by which they adorned themselves and hoped in God was by submitting to their own husbands. And that is a present middle participle, feminine nominative plural of hupatazo, again, participle of means. Verse 6, okay, you have the hupe kusen, that is third person singular, aorist active indicative of hupakuo, which just simply means obeyed. And just as, and he's making the comparison here, just as Sarah did what? She obeyed who? Abraham. And then the kalusa here is a participle, kalusa, present active participle, feminine nominative singular of kaleo, likely an attendant circumstance participle. You could say while calling him Lord. So she obeyed Abraham while calling him Lord. Then we have a second person plural aorist middle indicative of genomai. You have become. Here's our word here, genethete. Then you have two participles here, the aga thapoi usai, and then the negated me fabu menai. So those two participles, present active participles, they are feminine nominative plural, ones of aga thapoieo and the other one's fabeo. I use the word if because I'm contending that they are likely conditional participles. Mark Dubus, in his commentary on the book of First Peter, the Baylor Handbook series, he translates it as if as well and makes this comment. He says most translations take these participles as conditional, exhorting the recipients to Christian endurance as a manifestation of the reality of their salvation. So I think here Peter is provided in these two verses, provided basically the motivational grounds to do verses 1 through 4, but he's also provided an Old Testament example in the process through Sarah, again, with the exhortation in mind for wives in their home. Next week, we'll look at verse 7, which is specifically the command for the husbands. And then the following week, we will look at the diagram of verses 1 through 7. Have a great week. Happy New Year.